I don't watch too much anime nowadays, but there are a few that I grew up with that I still watch on occasion. And one of those few, which happens to be one that's still going today, is a really little known series, you may or may not have heard of it, called One Piece. I freaking love One Piece. It's pretty much the only anime I actually own merchandise for, not to mention a crapload of episodes of it on DVD. So what is One Piece anyway? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Beginning publication in Japan all the way back in 1997 and still ongoing to this day, One Piece is the story of 17-year-old pirate Monkey D. Luffy. Yes, his surname really is Monkey. I don't get it either. Maybe he's related to the guitar player from Korn. As he gathers a crew of pirates and sets out to find the mysterious treasure of Gold Roger, the man once known as King of the Pirates. The treasure known as the One Piece. That's the basic premise in a nutshell, but the amount of world building and character development that's gone into it makes it a much grander adventure series than I really have time to put into words here. I mean, at the time of this video, the episode count of the anime is in the 900s, and the manga is quickly closing in on chapter 1000. Yeah, I said 1000. I'm only half joking when I call One Piece a really little known series. I went over this a little bit in my video on surprisingly good licensed games, but One Piece is the best-selling manga of all time, and is a massive multimedia behemoth over in Japan. It spawned a TV anime that's, of course, still ongoing. It spawned merchandise, stage plays, 14 movies at the time of this video, a really beautifully animated ad campaign for Cup Noodle, and, of course, video games. To call One Piece a success would be grossly underselling it, but when I refer to its success, I'm talking about its success in its native homeland. Over here in North America, the series hasn't had quite the monster success as it's had in Japan, or anything close to it. Sure, the manga chapters release here the same day as Japan, and some of the newer video games and movies are getting released here, but that's about where the similarities end. The anime got pulled from television not once, but twice, and that's a bit of a story in and of itself. So why isn't One Piece as big a hit over here as it is over there? This is a bit of common knowledge amongst the American One Piece fanbase, but in 2004, the American distribution rights to the One Piece anime were purchased by a company called 4Kids Entertainment, who, at the time, also had the rights to other anime geared to a slightly younger audience. Most recognizably, the Pokemon anime. At this time, they also had the rights to Yu-Gi-Oh!, the Kirby anime, the F-Zero anime that I keep forgetting exists, and another one of my personal favorites, Shaman King, just to name a few. They were also the company who dubbed Sonic X into English, and those same voice actors would then go on to voice the characters in the games for a while, starting with the outstandingly terrible Shadow the Hedgehog. And it's always going to amuse me that the first Sonic game that the 4Kids actors would do was the one with all the swearing.
Where's that damn fourth Chaos Emerald?
Anyway, One Piece is definitely not the most violent, mature anime in the world. In fact, when the Funimation dub aired on Adult Swim years later, they aired it uncut, and it got away with a TV-14 rating at the absolute most. But in order for 4Kids to have One Piece and their other shows comply with some rather strict network standards and practices, as it was airing on Saturday mornings at the time, they had to make some unavoidable changes like editing guns and removing blood, alcohol and tobacco reference, and whatever small amount of ass nudity the show had, to make it suitable for a TV Y7 rating. This was common practice for all the shows they had at the time, but the thing is, in the case of One Piece, they infamously went a little overboard with it.
Now pummel his head flatter than the shape of the earth!
And that isn't even mentioning the frankly awful script writing and voice direction the dub received.
A desert toilet. A lovely way to describe it, Straw Hat. That makes you Desert Doo-Doo.
Now, I don't really have the time to go into all the things 4Kids did to the anime, so if you want a much more detailed history on that, then I'd highly recommend checking out this video by Red Bard. I'll leave a link in the description so you can go check it out. Now let's get back on topic. During 4Kids' handling of the series, the Bandai half of what is now known as Bandai Namco released a total of 4 One Piece games in the West. Since 3 of them utilize the same voice actors from the 4Kids dub, they serve as a nice little piece of One Piece's history over here in the West. And since we're talking about each game as they were released chronologically, let's start with the game known simply as One Piece for the Game Boy Advance. Now, this is definitely one of the more interesting One Piece games, as not only was it developed by Sonic Advance and Sonic Rush developer Dimps, but it was released exclusively in the United States as a tie-in with the dub. Yeah, imagine that. A game based on an anime made by a Japanese developer, released exclusively in the United States. For the sake of clarity, I'll be referring to this game as One Piece GBA for this video. And for the sake of transparency, I will say that in the case of this game in particular, I am using an emulator. Released on September 7th, 2005, One Piece GBA is a side-scrolling platformer slash beat-em-up. Each world is one of the story arcs broken into 2 levels, and a 3rd level dedicated to a boss fight. The levels are fairly linear, mostly just involving you going to the right of the screen, but there are a few occasions where you can go into buildings and such to find secrets like gold coins, and these treasure chests that I have no idea how to freaking open, to healing items such as apples, meat, and these things that are totally not cookies. It starts simple enough, Luffy on Captain Alvida's ship, similar to how episode 1 of the anime began. This is where you get acquainted with the controls and the general gameplay. It's also not until you reach deep within the ship before Luffy meets Kobe for the first time. Which is weird, that's not how it happened in the anime. While the game does follow the story of the anime, it's a way more truncated version of it. You don't fight Alvida at all, and once the first level's done, you immediately move on to the Navy base, wherein you meet up with Zolo. Why are you here? How did you get here? The game doesn't tell you, it just kind of assumes you're already familiar with the series. That probably explains why you run into the Meow Band brothers long before you ever run into Kaya or Captain Kuro. It's also in this second level that the game introduced enemies with guns who are super annoying since they can hit you from a distance. The game doesn't give you much in the way of control tutorials. You jump with the A button and attack with the B button, sure, but pressing the R button allows you to grab onto certain items and pulls for you to launch yourself with. Pressing the A and B buttons together unleashes a special attack, and the L button allows you to switch what character uses what special attack. For example, having it set to Luffy on the lower left will have him use Gum Gum Bazooka. Lord knows I kept accidentally pressing them both together when I just meant to jump though, so it's a little awkward. You get scored at the end of each level, landing you a set amount of points for each kind of enemy you take out, and how many. Huh, interesting, they left the words dead or alive on the wanted poster. Figured they would have edited that out like in the 4Kids dub. When you reach the second world, Port Town, this is where the game decides it wants to throw a rather odd difficulty spike at you. This is where they introduce bottomless pits, and lots of them. For some reason, the game has you running on rooftops in Orangetown, something Luffy didn't even do in the series, and it's because of that you're surrounded by instant death pits. It's even worse when an enemy attacks you and knocks you down them. And you only get 3 continues when you die, and if you run out of those, it's game over, and you gotta do the whole level all over again. Seriously, I died more times to these bottomless pits than any of the enemy encounters. Well, except for one, the end-level boss, Buggy the Clown. Not only does he hit hard and fast, but you can only damage him by hitting his head, as his Devil Fruit ability, his Cursed Fruit ability, allows him to split his body parts away and avoid being hit. He's hard to hit, and you do next to no damage to him. Also doesn't help he has multiple phases as his health decreases. Seriously, I tried for a solid 20 minutes and I could not beat Buggy the Clown. Even with save states, which I finally resorted to using because of all those goddamn bottomless pits. I had to look up a walkthrough to figure out you can actually combo him when he tries stabbing you, and then I was able to beat him. The rest of the game, or the portion of it I cared to play anyway, is pretty much the same. I ran into a maze-like level with respawning enemies that makes you run back and forth, and I got lost. A map would have been really helpful here. And it was at this point my patience for the game pretty much ran out. I feel like at this point I've seen everything the game has to offer, and I've got 3 other games in this video I need to cover, so let's just go ahead and move on. You understand.
One Piece! Grand Battle!
Released on the exact same day in North America as One Piece GBA, came One Piece Grand Battle for the PS2 and GameCube. One of the things that makes this one interesting is that while this was our first Grand Battle game, this is actually a modified version of the 4th Japanese Grand Battle game, One Piece Grand Battle Rush. Developed by Ganbarian, who would go on to make pretty much every other One Piece game after this, including my own personal favorite, One Piece Unlimited Adventure for the Nintendo Wii. Oh, and they also made Pandora's Tower. Was that game any good? I still gotta play that. Anyway, at the time that this game came out, 4Kids was only barely into the Drum Island arc, or the one where Chopper gets introduced. But clearly 4Kids wanted a video game tie-in to a property they had, so certain steps were taken. Characters and references from Alabasta were either rewritten or removed entirely, and any reference to Skypiea in Water 7 were also completely removed in this Western release. So, no Anaru and no Aokiji. Though there is a minigame that's literally one of the games in the Davy Back fight, and you can even see the Foxy Pirates in the background, but Foxy himself has been cut. 2 whole levels, Enaru's Maxim ship and the Sexy Foxy, were also cut from this game, and Marie Joy is now called Eden Rock. I'm guessing that's what 4Kids would have called it had they made it that far into the dub. This level is altered from how it originally looked. In addition to this, all of the post-Alabasta costumes for the Straw Hats, including the infamous Afro Luffy, were all cut from this version as well. Now obviously with 4Kids handling the translation of this game, it also uses their dub's naming conventions. For example, Zoro is still Zolo, Smoker is still Chaser, the Devil Fruits are still the Cursed Fruits, and the Marines are still the Navy. Though they bizarrely didn't edit this gate in Logtown to say Navy instead of Marine, so that's a little weird. And the characters' signature attacks all use the names from the dub. So Luffy's Gum Gum Gatling is called Gum Gum Rapid Fire, Bazooka is called Double Barrel, that kind of thing. This also includes all the other little edits and changes made in the 4Kids dub. For example, Mihawk's weapons look less like a crucifix, Smoker's cigars are gone, though they left his cigar bandolier on him for some reason. Though oddly enough, Nami's weapon, the Climatact, is still called the Climatact. Again, at the time this game came out, the dub hadn't gotten to the arc where it was introduced as the Weather Forcer.
Fine, then I won't tell you!
The Weather Forcer! Sometimes it brings a light drizzle. Or a storm!
Yeah, none of that climate baton bullcrap from the Viz manga here. So the game had to remove references to locations and characters that hadn't shown up in the dub at that point. I'm gonna put a pin in that for now because we're gonna be coming back to that topic a couple more times in this video. But some characters that would appear in the dub shortly after this game's release do still find their way in. Chopper, Crocodile, and Miss All Sunday herself, Nico Robin, or as the 4Kids dub like to call her, Miss Sunday, do still appear in the game as unlockable characters. And they're all voiced by the same actors that voiced them in the 4Kids dub, so that's a nice little bit of consistency, in a manner of speaking, because Sanji still sounds like this.
Yep, I'm a pirate chef. What an amazing goil.
One thing that really surprised me was this scene while playing story mode as Robin. You actually hear Captain Kuro say die at one point.
So, you have heard our plans. Then you must die.
That's pretty interesting considering how much the 4Kids dub would go out of its way to avoid using words like death, die, kill, that kind of thing.
When he wakes up, someone tell him it was a cap gun.
Come to think of it, One Piece GBA had characters throwing around words like kill and die pretty frequently too. You wanna know what I find interesting? Both the fighting games they released, this and Grand Adventure, were both given T for teen ratings. Which is funny to me for 2 reasons. By 2005, the Everyone 10 and Up rating existed, and this game probably could have gotten away without much, or any, censorship. They'd still have to censor out smoker cigars if they wanted to avoid a use of tobacco disclaimer, but even if they didn't, the games could have possibly still swung by with an E10 plus rating. I mean, for the insane amount of editing that the 4Kids dub was so infamous for the sake of getting a 7 to 11 age demographic, 2 of the games still got hit with teen ratings. I just find that really amusing. Heck, the Shaman King PS2 game and some of the 4Kids TMNT games also got hit with teen ratings too. Were those games any good? Actually, since we're on the topic, the games seem to feature a bit less censorship than the 4Kids dub was infamous for. For example, guns aren't censored to look like squirt guns, lady characters actually have visible cleavage, in Robin's case, a lot of it, and one other thing that happens in the next game, I'll bring it up when we get there. So you're probably asking, how is the game itself? Well, you ever play Power Stone? Because it's basically Power Stone. The game throws you and an opponent in a 3D arena, and you hit each other, you collect fruit to fill a special meter that allows you to hit each other harder, and you can use items to damage your opponent or inflict status ailments on them. My personal favorite item to use was Gaimon, the guy with the green afro stuck in a treasure chest, since you could just stand at a distance and just shoot at enemies. I ended up cheesing through so many fights this way. There are button combinations here, like most other fighting games, and also secret special attacks that you can pull off with the right amount of full charge meters. These little green orby things. Clearing a character's story mode can be done in like 15 minutes, because you only have to beat 5 matches, plus a box-breaking minigame halfway through. And at the end, you're rewarded with a barely 5-second cutscene.
I won't stop here. I'll keep going and never lose.
Yeah. The game kinda does what One Piece GBA does, and very loosely covers each character's major arcs, like Nami fighting Arlong, or Sanji trying to keep Don Krieg away from Zeph's logbook of the Grand Line. When you select a character at the beginning of the story mode, they give you a brief synopsis of their character arc, so you're not left completely in the dark about their motivations, but it still helps if you've already watched or read One Piece beforehand. I'm not gonna lie, the game itself is actually pretty fun to play, but as with any other game with a focus on multiplayer, it's a lot more fun with a second player. You'll get the most out of it if you're both One Piece fans, which may or may not be likely if you're anything like me. Hell, in both of my online and offline social circles, I'm the only one that likes One Piece. It's interesting to see how 4Kids handled character reveals and stuff like that at this point in time. They were a few years behind on where Japan was airing the anime, so they probably weren't very comfortable going forward too far ahead and showing characters that hadn't shown up in the dub yet. Something that they would have a little bit less of a problem with in their very next game.
It's my dream, and nobody's gonna stop me! I'm gonna find One Piece, and then I'll be king of the pirates!
In August 2006, nearly one full year after One Piece Grand Battle was released in the United States, came the game's kind of sequel, One Piece Grand Adventure. One of the things that makes this game particularly interesting is that, unlike its predecessor, Grand Adventure is not a trimmed-down version of an existing game with characters and stages missing. In fact, the game is actually a bit of a Frankenstein's monster of characters and levels that were cut from Grand Battle, but with a new RPG-style level progression system and island-hopping, mission-based gameplay. Exactly as was the case with One Piece GBA, One Piece Grand Battle is a game made from the ground up by a Japanese developer, released exclusively for English-speaking territories. I wasn't able to find any sales data for Grand Battle, but either that game sold well, or 4Kids just decided to commission another game title in 2006. Nonetheless, One Piece Grand Adventure was released in the US on August 29th, 2006. At that time, the 4Kids dub was in the middle of the Alabasta arc, a little less than halfway through. In fact, most of the Alabasta arc wouldn't even air in the United States until well into 2007, when 4Kids had already dropped the license. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. This didn't stop them from including characters and locations that show up after Alabasta, though. In fact, the back of the box shows off the main villain of the then upcoming Skypiea arc, Eneru, front and center. Though due to all the religious references, Eneru was also hit with some good old-fashioned 4Kids censorship. He's no longer God, but the Sky Lord. The other playable character from the story arc, Ohm, is no longer a priest, but a Sky Knight, as is the case with the AI-controlled support characters, Shura, Satori, and Gadatsu, or Gedatsu, in this game. On the plus side, though, they actually don't sound too bad.
No one will be saved.
Lose! Watch your tongue! I am the Sky Lord!
I would have been fine if these were the voices that they had been given had 4Kids made it to the Skypiea arc. I'd be here all day if I listed every single name change, but ones of interest are that Luffy's brother, Portgas D. Ace, is now Portgas D. Trace, Gonfall is now Gunfall, and the Priest's Ordeals, which show up as Ohm's special attack, are now the IQ tests. So I guess 4Kids was already planting the seeds of name changes before they got to the Skypiea arc, which, spoiler alert, they never did. But hey, at least Wiper is still Wiper. Still no Foxy, though. Or Aokiji. Though maybe that's a good thing. Maybe this was done to give fans a look into the not-too-distant future of the series. Because think about it. If you were a One Piece fan in the States back in 2006, who had zero access to the Japanese version, and you saw characters in this game that you had never seen before, wouldn't that get you at least a little excited to see them in the show? Well, that's what I believe the initial selling point to be anyway. I mean, hey, we saw that happen a lot in Unlimited Adventure. Frankie hadn't even been introduced in either the anime or the manga yet, at least the English versions of it, and he's one of the playable characters in that game.
Frankie the Shipwright!
This won't be the last time a 4Kids One Piece game shows off characters from the Jaya and Skypiea arcs, though. More on that later. Alright, now, about the actual game. The combat system remains largely unchanged from Grand Battle. The button layouts are exactly the same as before, the combos are exactly the same as before. Though this time around, the secret attacks now utilize a sort of rock-paper-scissors system for both the player and the opponent. If the player makes the right decision, then they will activate their strongest attack, and if they pick incorrectly or not at all, the strongest attack will not activate. So despite reusing nearly all of the same assets from Grand Battle, from stages to combos to voice samples, Grand Adventure does do enough to make it its own game. For starters, the single-player mode is very different from how it was in Grand Battle. Instead of just battling your way through a set number of fights, you actually start the game as a captain, and you slowly recruit characters to your crew as you go. When you first start, you only have access to Luffy's story mode, and like with One Piece GBA, it's a heavily truncated version of the story from the anime. I swear that's the last time I'll say that. With a few differences that you'd only notice if you were already a fan of One Piece. In Luffy's storyline, he'll recruit Zoro, Nami, Usopp, Sanji, Vivi, Chopper, and Nico Robin, now actually going by her real name and not Miss Sunday. But as you go, you'll encounter other enemies such as Buggy the Clown, Sir Crocodile, and Captain Chaser. And they have their own story modes where they recruit characters and journey through the world, just like in Luffy's story mode. Only their modes also serve as the other difficulty modes. This time around, though, you're rewarded with experience points for every win, and your characters will level up the more you use them. You can assign a skill point to each of your different stats for different effects, like more HP, higher defense, regular and special attacks doing more damage, and AI-controlled support characters being stronger and staying in the field longer. While you could just use one or two characters to win all the fights, some of the special objectives may require you to win a fight with a specific character or strategy in order to unlock something. Like a new costume, including ones that aren't lame palette swaps this time. Fighting isn't the only thing you're going to be doing this time around, though. In order to advance, sometimes you may have to play a minigame and win under certain conditions. Just to name a few, the box-breaking minigame from Grand Battle has returned. There are also Rumble Battles, a Horde Mode-esque game where you take out all the enemies under a certain time limit, and a new spot-build duck race mode that absolutely murders the frame rate. In fact, the whole game, at least the PS2 version, seems to suffer from some performance issues here and there. Visually, it does have some minor tweaks and improvements, but it does tend to come at the cost of frame rate. Playing with certain characters like Broggy tend to make the game lag. I forgot to mention that in the last game, but it happens there too. I don't know if the GameCube version is any better with its frame rate, but I can at least say that the PS2 version has some issues. And the audio balancing is a bit uneven too. The music tends to drown out the characters' voices sometimes.
Long time no see, Goofy. I've heard stories about you. I heard you're sailing the seas with a crew.
I guess I didn't really bring up graphics and presentation all that much in the Grand Battle portion because, what can I say? It's an anime fighting game released in the mid-2000s. It looks about what I expect it to look like. It doesn't do anything outstanding, but it doesn't do anything offensive either. Characters look and animate about how they're supposed to, and the overall presentation looks about the standard for an anime game on the 6th console generation. Though I will say, for the presentation of the character conversations, I think I actually prefer how it looked in Grand Battle. Sure, it was just static images over text boxes, but I find them to be so much more appealing than just the text boxes alone. The character profiles are shrunk down to these little icons, and they don't look as eye-catching to me. But that's just me. As for that multiplayer mode, which is now cleverly enough titled Grand Battle Mode, you get every character that was in One Piece Grand Battle, plus 8 new characters for this game. Funnily enough, one of those unlockable characters is Zoro's friend Kuina, who is very much dead, right?
You look just like a friend of mine. She died a long time ago.
Well, this would be a shock if your only knowledge of One Piece was the 4Kids dub. Because in the 4Kids dub, this is what happens to Kuina.
Kuina, she's at the hospital. She was fighting some guy and defeated him. But then he came back with friends and hurt her because he was embarrassed to be beat by a girl.
But now, because of her injury, she'll never be able to fight again.
Just like in Grand Battle, you only get a few characters when you first boot up the game, and unlocking more of them is all a matter of unlocking them in the story mode, if you have that kind of time. This time, though, you can input passwords to unlock level 100 versions of characters you want, but unless you're doing that with both players, the power scaling is going to be entirely too much in one player's favor. That can really be a drag when you and your friend want to play, but you don't have their favorite character unlocked. Though I guess that's typically the case with most fighting games, right? And considering how the story mode is more robust this time around, and the requirements for unlocking everybody in Versus mode can be trickier, it can take much longer than in One Piece Grand Battle. So if you want to unlock everyone, you're going to need a walkthrough and some patience. Or use Game Shark if that's an option. So this would be the last One Piece fighting game that we in the US would get for a while, but 4Kids, and by extension this video, aren't done with the series just yet. We still have one more game to look at.
One Piece Pirates Carnival!
So in the year of our Lord, 2006, we were blessed with not one, but 2 One Piece games, released just weeks apart from each other. Granted, these are both different genres, but it's still impressive that 4Kids had 2 One Piece games come out so close to each other, and on the same consoles. Though, unlike the last game we talked about, One Piece Pirates Carnival actually did come out in Japan. Released in November 2005 in Japan and September 2006 in the US, One Piece Pirates Carnival is a board game-style party game in a similar vein as the Mario Party series. This game was developed by Hand, the same developers as such games as the 2 Kingdom Hearts games on the Nintendo DS, and the excellent Digimon Story games. I won't lie, party games aren't exactly my forte, so I didn't really know what to expect going into this one. And also, I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you here, this was the game that I spent the least amount of time on. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Again. One Piece Pirates Carnival is a party game / minigame collection where you and 3 of your friends, or 3 CPUs if you're like me and don't have friends, Gather across a variety of One Piece themed game boards and try to gather as many panels on the board as you can. You win these panels by competing in mini-games, of which there are over 30. By winning panels, you gain in-game currency, and whoever has the most currency at the end of the game is the winner. So you're tempted to earn as many panels on the board and win as many mini-games as you can, because having the most panels and having won the most mini-games will land you a higher money count at the end of the game. But let's say you just want to play the mini-games and not the main board game mode. You can do that. Any minigame or captain game that you've played in the main mode will appear in the versus mode, though, like with the characters in the fighting games, they have to be unlocked first in the board game. And completing the board game can take anywhere between 1 to 2 hours. Luckily though, you can save at any time and come back later. And also, the board game mode can be played with up to 4 players, so you don't have to unlock everything alone this time. There are 3 types of panels in the game. The normal panels will have a character, usually one of the non-combative ones or a lackey to the main arc villains, who will give you a choice between 3 minigames to play for a chance to win their panel. Then you have the captain panels, which usually have an illustration of one of the major story arc villains. Whichever player reveals this panel will control the captain in a minigame, and if you beat the other 3 players as the captain, you gain that panel. Though the reverse is also true, and any of the other players that beat you can gain it. There's always 2 of the same captains on the board at all times, so gaining possession of one will automatically net you the other. And then finally, there are event panels. Revealing these will have an effect based on the kind of character they are. If they're a friend panel, you'll automatically gain 5 million berries to your score. If it's a Navy panel, you'll lose 5 million. And if it's something called a Davy Backfight panel, then the player who uncovers it gets to select an opponent's captain panel and fight for control over it through their individual captain game. Whoever's in the lead will also be randomly hit with an event like a captain mutiny, where a randomly chosen captain panel will turn gray, or unclaimed, and force all 4 players into their captain game to fight for control over it. If the captain wins, the panel will stay unclaimed, but if a player wins, they'll claim both of the types of captain panels on the board. Halfway through every board game, you'll be stopped by Django the Hypnotist, or Foxy if you're playing the Japanese version, to play a special minigame styled after one of the Davy Backfight games from the anime. It's the players in 1st and 3rd place versus the one in 2nd and 4th place, and whatever team wins will receive 10 million berries each. The halftime chance game I received on both of my playthroughs was the Pirate Dodgeball game, and I, for the life of me, could not get the hang of it. I'm honestly kind of surprised that this game even bothered mentioning the Davy Backfights, let alone explaining how they work, seeing as how 4Kids never even got that far in their dub. Hell, the minigame with the Usopp Pirates in Grand Battle was a freaking Davy Backfight, where you take the opponent's crewmates when you win. And we also get a minigame that takes place on Long-Ring Longland, and that was after the Skypiea arc, which, again, 4Kids never got to. In fact, this game probably has the most amount of stuff that 4Kids either didn't get to in their dub or cut out entirely. Like Laboon the Whale here, who acts as a board effect. I'll bet kids who only watched the 4Kids dub and didn't read the manga had absolutely no idea who this was or why he was so significant.
So much for that iceberg!
And you know what other cut the 4Kids dub was infamous for? The Little Garden arc, which involved these 2, the giants Dorry and Broggy. And they both show up in the goddamn instruction manual. Hell, Broggy even shows up as a background character in one of the arenas in Grand Adventure. And you want to know what arena that is? That's actually Foxy's ship, the Sexy Foxy. Though I gotta admit, I'm not the biggest fan of the world of the voices they were given here. So maybe them not showing up in the 4Kids dub was actually a blessing in disguise.
This island is our battle station. Might makes right, and right makes might. If you're right, you win the fight.
Our feet will defeat them all. We'll whomp them and stomp them.
Speaking of characters that the 4Kids dub never got around to, Eneru and Satori from the Skypiea arc are here as well as Blackbeard, who appeared briefly in text boxes in Grand Adventure, and they actually give him a voice here, and it's actually not bad.
Yuck! Today's cherry pie is the pits!
Bellamy is here too, and he sounds...
Real pirates don't need your kind. You just drag everybody down.
Again, I blame the directing because I've heard this actor in other things and he really isn't bad. I will say though that I am pretty happy with the voice he was given in the Funimation dub.
In this age of oceans, the very men who are brave enough and capable of navigating currents end up chasing these ridiculous streams and die in the process.
But I think the worst casting choice here was the voice they gave to Wiper. Oh, I'm sorry, I guess it's Wyler now.
Don't talk to me. I don't need your lip. I want to toss you all out.
Alright, that's enough ragging on the voice actors. Let me wrap up this segment by saying this about One Piece Pirates Carnival. Even as someone who's not the biggest fan of the world of party games, I still found this one to be pretty passable. I mostly just look at it for its place in One Piece's early history in the US. It kind of blows my mind that they didn't just cut out Laboon and the little garden giants here when they skipped over them completely in the dub. I mean, it didn't stop them from cutting out Foxy, CP9, and even Frankie, but Jaya, Skypiea, and even Longring Longland are all here. I guess they didn't want to get too ahead of themselves. But yeah, as for the game itself, it's alright. It's got fun parts in it, but since I'm not the biggest fan of party games, I don't really see myself coming back to this very often, even if it is One Piece flavored. Since we're now a good decade and a half separated from the 4Kids dub, I gotta say, I don't look at it with disgust or hatred anymore, so much as fascination. Maybe it's bile fascination, but still. Like, I can't believe this dub actually existed at one point. It took an anime with quite a bit of violence and slightly mature subject matter that was aimed at older kids and teens, and tried to tone it down for kids ages 7 to 11. And it would have probably been more widely accepted had they not changed so much of the dialogue and had it border on being a gag dub.
So tell me, does he give you nice doggy biscuits when he wants you to play fetch?
And you, all bark, no bite.
Woof, woof, woof.
And maybe give it better voice directing, too. Granted, I'm sure I'd be singing an entirely different tune if the 4Kids dub were still around and that were the only version that was available to us. But to me, anyway, it's interesting to look back on it from the comfort of it being years and years later and a substantially better, more faithful English dub being available to us now. In December 2006, just 3 months after Pirates Carnival was released in the US, 4Kids announced that they had dropped the One Piece license and canceled production of their dub. And another 4 months after that announcement, Funimation had announced that they had snagged the rights to it, where the license remains to this day. Granted, we still had to wait another 5 months for all the 4Kids episodes to finish airing before we got to the Funimation dub on TV, but we got there. So there's a little fun fact for you. The first episode of the Funimation dub aired on the Cartoon Network version of Toonami just 1 week after the final 4Kids episode had aired. And the sudden change in voice cast, background music, and the show suddenly taking itself far more seriously probably confused the hell out of some casual viewers. Now, which of the 4 games did I personally enjoy the most? Well, after having played all 4 of them, I find myself leaning the most towards Grand Battle, for how simple it is to pick up and play, and that the primary focus is on the fighting, and that unlocking the characters isn't quite as tricky to do. Though I could see myself coming back to Grand Adventure to try and level up some characters and try the other story modes. For my money, though, I still say that One Piece Unlimited Adventure is still my favorite One Piece game to this day. To me, it's just genuinely fun to play. If you want to hear me talk more about that game, I have it in my surprisingly good licensed games video from a few years back. It's the last game I talk about in that video, in case you don't feel like watching the whole thing. Granted, the video is old and kind of crap now, but it's there if you feel like watching it. These days here in the US, One Piece, both the anime and the games, are in a pretty good place right now. We're getting most of the newest releases, and the latest at the time of this video, One Piece World Seeker, came out in North America and Europe just 1 day after its Japanese release. And the same release schedule seems to be the case for the soon-to-be-released at the time of this video, One Piece Pirate Warriors 4. Hell, we even got the 3DS remake of the Japan-only JRPG. Though I will argue that some of the One Piece games are better than others. Though sadly, Bandai Namco seems hell-bent on never having English voice acting in a One Piece game ever again. Even the games based on My Hero Academia, which was the single most cosplayed anime I saw at the last convention I went to last year, didn't get an English voice track for either of its games. And neither did any of the games based on everybody's favorite anime of all time, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Nah, unless it's a Dragon Ball Z game or a Naruto game, it ain't getting English voice acting, and that's just how it is. Which makes it all the more astounding that that one Kill la Kill fighting game actually got an English voice track, though that game was self-published by Arc System Works and not Bandai Namco, so that probably explains why. And that's a shame too, because now we have a stellar English voice cast for One Piece, and it's super disappointing that we can't get them in games anymore. I know a lot of people say that English dubs in general are shite, but I typically choose to ignore those people. Which is funny considering I just talked about 4Kids One Piece games for the last half hour. But yeah, I think this video's gone on long enough. Probably far too long for some of you, so let's wrap this up. 4Kids may have mishandled One Piece greatly in an attempt to appeal to a much younger audience than was intended, maybe not even really knowing what they had. But the 4Kids dub was also my first true exposure to One Piece as well. And I found that through the censorship, endless dad jokes, and questionable at best voice directing, enough of Ichiro Oda's brilliant stories still shined through enough for me to start reading the manga. That's actually what ended up happening to me with Shaman King too, as a matter of fact. And I like to believe that because of the way they handled their dub, that caused enough people to really start seeking out the manga, and thus demand a more faithful adaptation. And that's why Funimation was able to swoop in so quickly to claim it after 4Kids finally dropped it. Or at least that's what I like to think anyway. I'm just gonna go ahead and spill this here because I have no idea when I'll get another chance to in a video. But One Piece is a series that I plan on seeing through to its end, however long that ends up taking. I hear people joking about how anime doesn't start getting good until such and such many episodes, and feel free to disagree with me on this, but I honestly find that One Piece starts good and just gets more and more great. And the video games, whether they have English voice acting or not, will be ones I'll continue to play for as long as they get released here, even if the overall reception of them is modest at best. Maybe one day, if there's enough demand. And with that, we've come to the end of the single longest video I've ever made. I guess I just had a lot to say about these games and about One Piece itself. And if by some miracle you made it to the end of this video, then thank you so much for watching. And I'm gonna try really hard never to make a video this freaking long ever again.
Yo! Don't give it up, Luffy! Don't give it up, Solo! Don't give it up now, man! Don't give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up, give it up! No! Here's how the story goes, we find out about a treasure in the Grand Line, there's no doubt.